Hi, welcome back to Book Club. This is Lolli here, and we are in the process of reading Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and we're starting Chapter 3 today. The next day, we went to the hardware store where my father bought a deluxe power lawnmower. I'm going to stop right there because this is to remind you, written in the 1970s. So, a power lawnmower was a big deal. Everyone had push lawnmowers. So a power lawnmower like we all have now, we take for granted, was new. And this was his first deluxe power lawnmower with the bag on the back. And now he doesn't have to work so hard to push the lawnmower. He's got his own deluxe power lawnmower. So that evening, after our first at home in New Jersey supper, turkey sandwiches from the local deli or delicatessen, my father went out to cut grass with his new mower. He did fine on the front, but when he got around to the backyard, he had to check to see how much grass there was in the bag on the mower. It's a very simple thing to do. The man at the hardware store demonstrated just how to do it. Only you have to turn the mower off before you reach inside, and my father forgot that. I heard him yell, "Barbara, I had an accident." He ran to the house. He grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his hand before I had a chance to see anything. Then he sat down on the floor and turned very pale. "Oh my God," my mother said when the blood seeped through the towel. "Did you cut it off?" When I heard that, I raced outside to look for the limb. I didn't know if they were talking about the whole hand or what, but I read about you're supposed to save limbs if they get cut off because sometimes the doctors could sew them back on. I thought it was a good thing they had me around to think of those things. But I couldn't find a hand or any fingers, and by the time I came back into the house, the police were there. My mother was on the floor, too. When my father's head was in her lap, I rode in the police car with them since there was no one at home to stay with me. I had a silent talk with God on the way to the hospital. I said this inside my head so no one would notice. "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. My father's had an awful accident. Please help him, God. He's really kind and nice, even though he doesn't know you the way I do. He's a good father and he needs his hand. So please, please let him be all right. I'll do anything you say if you help him. Thank you, God." It turned out that my father hadn't cut off anything, but it took 8 stitches to sew up his finger. The doctor who sewed him was Mr. Potter. After he was through with my father, he came out to chat. When he saw me there, he said, "I have a daughter about your age." I love the way people always think they know somebody your age until you tell them how old you really are. "I'm going on 12, I said. "Gretchen's almost 12 too, the doctor said. Well, he was right about my age. She'll be in 6th grade at Delano School. So will you, Margaret," my mother reminded me, as if I needed reminding. "I'll tell Gretchen to look for you," Dr. Potter said. "Fine," I told him. As soon as we got home from the hospital, my father took my mother to look up Moose Freed in the phone book and arrange for him to cut our lawn once a week. On Labor Day, I got up early. I wanted to fix my desk for my room before school started. I bought a pile of paper, pencils, erasers, and reinforcements. Reinforcements are these little white pieces of paper that people used to put around their filler paper, their notebook paper, because the holes in the notebook paper would always break because it was so thin back there. Now the paper is stronger, so you don't need reinforcements. And paper clips. I'm always real neat until about October. While I was in the middle of the project, I heard a noise. It sounded like someone knocking. I waited to see if my parents would wake up. I tiptoed to the room, but the door was still closed and it was quiet, so I knew they were still asleep. When I heard the knocking again, I went downstairs to investigate. I wasn't scared because I knew I could always scream and my father could always rescue me if it turned out to be a burglar or a kidnapper. The knocking came from the front door. Nancy was away for the weekend, so it couldn't be her, and we didn't really know anybody else. "Who is it?" I asked, pressing my ear to the door. "It's Grandma, Margaret. Open up." I unlatched the chain and both locks and flung the door open. "Grandma, I can't believe it. You're really here." "Surprise!" Grandma yelled. I put a finger over my lips to let her know my parents were still asleep. Grandma was loaded down with Bloomingdale's shopping bags, but when she stepped into the house, she lined up on the floor and gave me a big hug and a kiss. "My Margaret," she said, flashing her special smile. When she smiles like that, she shows all her top teeth. They aren't her real teeth. It's what Grandma calls a bridge. She could take them out a whole section of her 4 top teeth when she wants to. And she used to entertain me by doing that when I was little. Naturally, I never told my parents. When she smiles without her teeth in place, she looks like a witch. But with them in her mouth, she's very pretty. "Come on, Margaret, let's go get these bags into the kitchen." I picked up one shopping bag. "Grandma, this is so heavy. What's in it?" "Hot dogs, potato salad, coleslaw, corned beef, rye bread." I laughed. "You mean it's food?" "Of course it's food." "But they have food in New Jersey, Grandma." "Not this kind." "Oh, yes," I said, "even delicatessen." "No place has a delicatessen like New York." I didn't argue about that. Grandma has certain ideas of her own. When we got all the bags into the kitchen, Grandma scrubbed her hands at the sink and put everything into the refrigerator. When she was done, I asked, "How did you get here?" Grandma smiled again, but didn't say anything. She was measuring coffee into the pot. You can't make her talk about something until she's ready. Finally, she sat down at the kitchen table, fluffed out her hair, and said, "I came in a taxi." "All the way from New York?" "No," Grandma said, "from the center of Fairbrook." "But how did you get to the center of Fairbrook?" "On a train." "Oh, Grandma, you didn't." "Oh, yes, I did. But you always said trains are so dirty." "So what's a little dirt? I'm washable." We both laughed while Grandma changed her shoes. She brought a spare pair along with her knitting in one of the shopping bags. "Now," she said, "take me on a tour of the house." I led her everywhere except upstairs. I pointed out closets, the downstairs bathroom, my mother's new washer and dryer, and where we sat to watch TV. When I was finished with Grandma, when I finished, Grandma shook her head and said, "I just don't understand why they had to move to the country." "It's not really country," Grandma explained. "There aren't any cows around." "To me, it's country," Grandma said. I heard the water running upstairs. "I think they're up. Should I go see?" "You mean, should you go tell?" "Well, should I?" "Of course," Grandma said. I ran upstairs and into my parents' bedroom. My father was putting on his socks. My mother was brushing her teeth in the bathroom. "Guess who's here?" I said to my father. He didn't say anything. He just yawned. "Well, aren't you going to guess?" "Guess what?" he asked. "Guess who's here in this very house at this very minute?" "Nobody but us, I hope," my father said. "Wrong." I danced around the bedroom. "Margaret," my father said in a disgusted with me voice. "What is it you're trying to say?" "Grandma's here." "That's impossible," my father told me. "I mean it, Daddy. She's right downstairs in the kitchen making your coffee." "Barbara?" My father went into the bathroom and turned off the water. I followed him. My mother had a mouthful of toothpaste. "I'm not done, Herb," she said, turning on the water again. My father shut it off. "Guess who's here?" he asked her. "What do you mean, who's here?" my mother said. "Sylvia, that's who's here." My father turned the water back on so my mother could finish brushing her teeth. But my mother turned it off and followed my father in the bedroom. I followed too. This was fun. I guess by then my mother must have swallowed her toothpaste. What do you mean, Sylvia? My mother asked my father. I mean my mother, my father said. My mother laughed. That's impossible, Herb. How would she even get here? My father pointed at me. Ask Margaret. She seems to know everything. In a taxi, I said. They didn't say anything. And a train, I said. Still nothing. It wasn't so dirty after all. 10 minutes later, my mother and father joined Grandma in the kitchen where the table was set and the breakfast all ready. It's hard to get mad at Grandma, especially when she flashes her super smile. So my mother and father didn't say anything except what a wonderful surprise, and how clever of Grandma to take a train and a taxi to our new house when she'd never been to Fairbrook before. After breakfast, I went upstairs to get dressed. Grandma came up with me to see my room. It's a lot bigger than the old one, I said. Yes, it's bigger, Grandma agreed. You could use new bedspreads and curtains. I saw some the other day, pink and red plaid. Then we could get red carpeting to match and a Grandma sighed, but I guess your mother wants to fix it up herself. I guess so, I said. Grandma sat down on my bed. Margaret, darling, she said, I want to make sure you understand that we'll still be as close as always. Of course we will, I said. A few miles doesn't mean a thing, Grandma said. Just because I can't drop in after school doesn't mean I won't think of you every day. I know that, Grandma. I tell you what, I'll call you every single night at 7:30. How's that sound? You don't have to call every night, I said. I want to. It's my dime, Grandma laughed. That way you could tell me what's going on and you could keep me posted about New York. Okay? Sure, Grandma. But Margaret, what? You answered the phone. Your mother and father might not like me calling so much. This is just between you and me, all right? Sure, Grandma. I love to get phone calls. We all spent the rest of the day sitting around in our yard. Grandma was knitting me a new sweater. My mother planted some fall flowers, and my father read a book. I sunbathed, thinking it would be nice to start school with a tan. We ate Grandma's food for supper, and every time she bit into a pickle, she said, nothing like the real thing. We drove her back to the Farbrook station while it was still light. Grandma has this thing about walking in New York at night. She's positive she's going to get mugged. Before she got out of her car, she kissed me goodbye and told my parents, now don't worry, I promise I'll come up once a month. Well, maybe twice. And that's not to see you, Herb. Or you either, Barbara. I've got to keep an eye on my Margaret, that's all. Grandma winked. With that, she grabbed the shopping bag with her shoes and knitting and left, waving goodbye until we couldn't see her anymore. Tune in later for Chapter 4. Good old Grandma.